explained to her I still can't get the angle of the camera right. It's either too low or too high. It's a $2,000 effing camera, and I don't intend on taking it off of a sturdy tripod, which is what it's on. And if it's going to be off angle, but it's safe, then that's what we're going to have, because I don't have the money to be replacing that anytime in the next decade. But Ms. Lopez, ever patient with me. I feel like I am an unofficial son of yours who you just have to be patient with, because I always seem to be late or messing something up.
Oh, not to worry, not to worry. Glad to be with you whenever we get it connected up.
Absolutely. Beautiful. And I like your shirt. It matches the flag.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. The great and beautiful Clare Lopez. I got your email. I looked at your 4th article about critical race theory.
Oh, good. Thanks.
And I know it. And I'll put that in the description. I haven't done that yet. I'll put that in the description, because your articles are if you like these episodes with Ms. Lopez, you will like the articles. And I think it's particularly pertinent, seeing as how I believe it was a general or a high up member of the military caught fire the other day for saying how it's important. And it is Governor DeSantis, I believe, is banning it in schools in Florida. And it does seem to be, as with all things, whether it's vaccine hesitancy or whether it's fiery but mostly peaceful protests, the perversion of language and the hijacking of semantics, to me, the more friendly it sounds means it's probably more insidious. And critical race theory, that's about as vanilla as a name as you can get, which to me just implies that what it is it's racism against white people. And whenever anyone's of, classic white person this, and I mean, if it's not ironic, if you have to excuse me, I have to go on a little rant. If it's not ironic enough that the people fighting fascism, Antifa, are the ones who wear black and intimidate using violence and burn storefronts and intimidate people from speaking at college campuses, which used to be the bastion of the classical left, it's also that the same people who say white people are racist, and then it's classic white person this, or old white guy that, or all I want for Christmas is white genocide, or white people this, white people that. That is racism. It doesn't matter. The best way to do it is to, every time you see a news article and it has white in the title, I challenge you, the listener, to just read it back to yourself in your mind, but replace white with black, or with Jew, or with Muslim, or with women, or immigrant. Any title. Uneducated black men are ruining America. There's a recent one, but it's uneducated white men. There are too many immigrants in CPA jobs. No, there's too many white people. Replace white people with immigrants. And it's important to point out, because as long as it's about white people, white privilege, white fragility, the evils of nationalism, white pride, we're slowly, and you have to respect your enemy, but we are slowly marching towards it's a slow drum, not a drum roll, it's a slow drum beat for the hatred of white people. And as we know, with BLM stated by their founders to dissolve the Western nuclear family, we know that this is what it's moving towards. And it is just as evil as actual white supremacists who think blacks are lesser than them, or think Jews are lesser than them. It is no different. It is no less evil. And I'm not talking in circles, but you have written several great articles about it. We did an episode a couple weeks about it. Could you explain or walk them through where you think it's going now, or whatever you want to talk about regarding your 4th article?
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that article. It is called Citizen Patriots Are Fighting Back, published at Front Page Magazine just a couple days ago on Tuesday of this week, June 22nd. And the point that I'll make is one I made to somebody else earlier today, talking about exactly this. In the beginning, this really was about white. And it began, of course, critical race theory began with Marxist academics and ideologues, in the faculty lounges of Columbia University and elsewhere. as a wedge issue to drive apart American society. Now, Marxism, of course, which is where critical race theory comes from, Marxism began, as everybody knows, as a class warfare thing. It was the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, right? But when they tried to export that in the 1930s to the United States, they realized that because of our free market capitalist system, that class warfare was not going to take. We have upward mobility. We have opportunity for anyone with the skill, the aptitude, and the work ethic to go after it. And everybody knows that. So they couldn't use economic class warfare. They had to find something else. And what they hit upon was race, because Americans are absurdly sensitive about racial topics for whatever reason. And I think I've talked about this little book before. You can see it's a slim sort of paperback written by Manning Johnson. This was published in 1958. It's called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. And this author, Manning Johnson, was an African-American who, as a young man, was pulled into communism in America. And he bought into, the whole race wedge issue that they used to substitute for economic class divisions. But after a while, being a young man from a good family and a religious family, and him being a pretty smart guy, he realized this was all a front, it was all a scam, it was all intended precisely to drive apart Americans, to drive a wedge into our society. And he broke away, and he left communism behind. And that's when he wrote this book. So I think it's an important example from a personal perspective and what he wrote about how communists and Marxists used or tried to use the race issue, specifically African Americans. And by the way, of course, as I've written also before, in an October 2020 article specifically for the Epoch Times, that one being entitled Race Revolution and the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, about how the CCP, being Marxist and, of course, Maoist, also to this day use the wedge issue of race in the United States to tear our society apart. But what I wanted to get at, and what I was talking about with this other individual this morning, was that while in the beginning, being the 1950s, 60s, even further back, maybe than that, and to the present day even, it is very much about white and black in America. The words no longer mean exactly what they used to mean. So race is no longer really about race or ethnic origin. It's not about being born white, Caucasian, Latino, African American. It's about a mindset. It's about an ideology. Do you buy into the left's ideology, of Marxism, of the classes being oppressed and oppressors, of this division between those who will never, ever overcome the past history of the United States, which included racism, a lot of it, and, of course, slavery, too. But we can never overcome that. So it's about the mindset and inculcating this into our children in the classrooms through critical race theory studies, ethnic studies, more than it is anymore about strictly race, because, well, for one thing, we're a very mixed society. I mean, there aren't strict divisions in terms of families and marriage and children anymore between white, black, Asian, or what have you. We're very much mixing and mixed these days. So when you see the attacks being launched by the left, by the Marxists, the communists, the CRT champions, against people like a Candace Owens, a Larry Elder, a Leo Terrell, an Alan West, a Ben Carson, I could go on, with brilliant, smart, conservative thinking African Americans, you realize it's not about the color anymore. I mean, they're African American, those names I just gave you. But they are being called, sometimes they're being called, well, that's a white way of thinking. Achievement, personal responsibility, getting the right answer in school in order to get that grade, those kinds of things. It's about a way of thinking, and they'll hurl these accusations at those brilliant, wonderful Americans, along with other epithets like sellout and traitor and Uncle Tom and things like that. But the whole point of to say, this is not just about race anymore. It began that way, but that's not what it's about.
It's to quote Brigadier General Dr. Robert Spalding, who wrote Stealth War, how he opens his book, or in the opening sentences, is you have to respect your enemy. You have to respect the Chinese Communist Party because they are waging a beautiful war. So purely, and this is a guy that piloted the $2 billion B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, a nuclear-armed bomber. It's a beautifully waged game. They're evil, but in the same way that the Nazis had beautiful rocket engineering, it's a beautiful war. And as you just said,
it's unrestricted warfare. Remember that book, Unrestricted Warfare. Everything is fair game.
Yes, and
everything and everyone.
And if I'm analyzing what you're saying correctly, it's that, okay, yeah, it's whoever's got the chutzpah, whoever wants to take the risk, who wants to, I didn't have anything in my pocket, now I run a bank. If you want that American dream story, you can start with a shitty laptop, and then 400 episodes later, you can have a great webcam talking to the wonderful Clare Lopez. You can work towards it if you want. But because they identified that in the United States, we can't restrict on class warfare, or we can't argue on class warfare, we do drive the wedge between, like you said, race. And now they slowly blur the line. It's almost like fiat currency.
It's morphing. It's morphing.
It's almost fiat currency. How this is a gold. This is a certificate for gold. It's redeemable of gold, and then you close the gold window, and then you get rid of the gold standard. And next thing you know, we're all fighting over $100 bills that have no actual value. You can't put them into electronics. They don't have any value overseas. That they're not going to last 1,000 years. In the same way, they've morphed what began as, this is just. It's a Pavlovian response almost. I'm not sure if that's quite the right analogy, but it morphs from black and white to
it's the misappropriation of language. Let me reach over. You know what? Here it is. Yes, my little bookshelf. I want to pull out another little booklet, and it really is a booklet. It's quite small. It's written by Joseph Pieper, Pieper, Pieper. It's called Abuse of Language, Abuse of Power. Now, this was written back in, published in 1974. But this explains in very good, clear terms the abuse of political power, he says, is fundamentally connected with the sophistic abuse of the word. Public abuse of language, okay? That's what they're doing. And unless we're aware of it, we might not notice, but do notice how the language and the use of language has become corrupted by the left. And again, that it is not about race. Again, the issue is never the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the revolution.
Mm-hmm.
What will serve to tear us apart? What will serve to descend this society into chaos? That's what this is about. But language is very much one of the tactics, and a very sophisticated one for those who are not, necessarily paying attention. That is what they're doing with the language. When I say it's no longer about being white or black, now it is closer to the truth, honestly, that it's always been. And that's about the leftist, communist, Marxist mentality, the ideology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's communism versus freedom and liberty, which one step removed is the class separation, and they can't hit us on that. So then they remove a second step, and they, in pure racism, say lower class, that's black. And if you are a Ben Carson, if I recall correctly, Charles Barkley, if you say anything that has to do with personal responsibility or working hard, it's their words that is white. And if you are downtrodden, then that is black, which, aside from the fact that is racist as shit, it's a beautiful way to dress up communism versus freedom and liberty.
It's terribly insulting. It's terribly insulting to those.
I'm looking at it from a tactical standpoint. You have to respect it. It's evil. It's evil, and they're teaching it in schools now.
And you know what? I think I've spoken about this before with you, Tommy, certainly with others too, that in a way, the horrible lockdowns of this past year, parents stuck at home couldn't go to work. The businesses were closed. Kids stuck at home, they couldn't go to school. They're doing remote learning on a laptop on the kitchen table. In a way, there was a little small silver lining to all of that, because for the first time, parents became aware of what their kids were being taught. And I've said this before, they were appalled, they were horrified, and now they are furious. And that's where we're seeing all these videos of parents by the hundreds, flocking into auditoriums and halls where local school board meetings are being held, mm-hmm. and demanding to have their say, one after the other, going up to the microphone and the podiums and calling out these corrupt, leftist, communist, Marxist school board members. Now, in many places in the country, school board members are elected and they can be unelected. Some places they're appointed, and that would be by a higher elected official, like, I don't know, maybe let's say a governor, but that governor is elected too. So one way or another, these school board members can be unelected, and I think that's where we're going.
Has the Biden administration said something about that? Am I regurgitating false news? I don't know if I saw a meme or something. But aren't people voicing opinions how these meetings need to be shut down? Obviously, citing COVID, saying we can't have these hateful white, fragile white people, kind of going with their own insurrection against school boards. Is that correct? Well, I mean,
you may have seen, your viewers may have seen video from just a day or two ago in Loudoun County, Virginia, and a Loudoun County school board meeting, where there were indeed many hundreds of parents attending. When the sentiment became overwhelmingly obvious to the school board that these parents were done with it and up to here with it all, they turned off the mics and closed down the meeting. And then for those parents who remained in the room having been reserved until a certain time of the evening, which was nowhere near yet, and the parents remained in the room talking to one another, they called the police. And the Loudoun County Sheriff's Department came and hauled off at least two of the parents, putting them under arrest for speaking openly in a public space that had been reserved and was still reserved and open to the public. So, this is the kind of confrontation that we're seeing in these videos. And this is only making Americans more aware, more upset, and more determined to push back.
The Streisand effect. Not only that, I mean, I didn't know any of that. Man, if that's not naked communism. Shut it down. Cut the mic, shut it down, subvert. Don't meet the argument on the field of rationale, logic, and
they can't, of course, right?
Exactly.
They can't.
Well, because they can't say the quiet part out loud. So they can't confront it. So what do? You lie. It's, Tommy, did you take a cookie? No. Tommy, did you just start crying, shit your pants, blame it on my little brother? Just, it's, you throw a tantrum, and if that doesn't work, you call the authorities and remove them. And thank God we're not at a point yet where the authorities come and you're never seen again. But for anyone who's still on the fence, don't take Claire's word for it. Don't take my word for it. We're clearly biased. We both have flags behind us. We're both evil white people. Look at it with your own mind and observe it soberly and ask yourself a question. And I always tell people this when it comes to some iffy subject or touchy subject, or as YouTube stated in their email to me as to why I'm not monetized, because I broach, quote, controversial topics that are harmful to the viewer, but that's another thing for another time. I always ask my listeners, or before the podcast, anyone I was arguing with, I would ask them to ask the questions that I'm asking, ask them to themselves internally, and you don't have to voice your answer. Because all of us, not the least of which me, have egos, and our egos get in the way of, Claire, you might be saying to me right now, Tommy, do you really think that swearing on a podcast is good? And my ego is going to get in the way. And I'm going to say, fuck yeah, I do. Now, if you say, Tommy, I know, my mom feels the same way. Now, if you told me, Tommy, I don't want you to answer that question because I don't want you to answer it on air. I don't want you to, have to defend your ego. But I want you to ask yourself that. I meditate every day. I take a hot shower every day. Ask yourself quietly. And you don't have to tell me the answer because I don't want that to influence your answer. When I ask myself these things, maybe I'm meditating and I'm thinking, do I really need to... I don't have to admit to Claire that she's right. Do I really need to swear? Probably not. It's probably a little tasteless. So anyone that's listening to this, I ask you, you don't have to write some comment. You were right, I was wrong. Nobody likes to do that, myself above all else. Ask yourself, in your mind, if you think that this is going down a good road. When you come to voice your opinions, instead of being argued with, your mic is cut and you're hauled away by men with guns. Or you're censored on big tech. Or you're shadow banned, or a bunch of skinny kids from LA wearing black are going to come throw a cinder block through your cafe window. Ask yourself internally. Don't voice your answer. I don't want your ego to get in the way of it. Just ask yourself internally if that sits well with you. But that is where, sorry for that little Mr. Rogers aside, but that is where it seems to be going, and no one can... Dr. Malone was on Brett Weinstein's podcast, the Dark Horse podcast, talking about, actually, I guess this episode can't go on YouTube, talking about ivermectin and COVID treatments. And that podcast got censored. The co-creator of mRNA vaccine technology has been silenced for, quote, spreading medical misinformation. Now, this podcast isn't even supposed to be a COVID podcast. But the very idea that you can't meet these individuals on the field of debate, to me, that alone shows that you don't have anything to go against it, or you can't say it out loud because you do have an insidious evil plan. Do you think that, and another thing to cover on, and I'm jumping all over the place and you're sitting there patiently, we're not going to see... So anyone that's maybe thinking, Claire, what are you talking about? Hundreds of parents are taking their kids out of school. They're starting homeschool.
1 million. The latest number I've seen is across the country within the last year or, X number of months, at least 1 million children have been pulled out of the public education system.
something
They may have gone into private schools. They may have gone into charter schools. They may have gone into homeschooling, variety of other options, but they're no longer in the public school system.
And an important thing to remember is you're not going to see that broadcast, okay? If you're living in New England or you're born there like I was, you're not going to see a Boston radio telling you why the Yankees are about to kick your ass. No one is going to, there's just negative propaganda. No one's ever going to do that. So if you don't see these things on the news, don't get discouraged or think that it's all lost. They're not going to, you can't talk about censored topics on YouTube, and one of the censored topics is talking about censorship. They're going to cut the cord. What's the first thing a team, a spec ops team does going in? You shut down the electronics so they can't call for help. Now, I saw Tim Kennedy, who's an unashamed American, patriotic American, evil white male, former Green Beret. His Instagrams, it's always hilarious to follow. He's been fact-checked all the time for talking about how confiscation of guns always leads to death camps. I might be fake news, but if I recall, I think I sent a link to you. He's actually starting his own school in Texas because no one else is. He's be the change you want to see in the world. He's starting a school for parents who are sick of the critical race theory. Are we going to slowly see a surge in that? Is that the way that the market is going to respond? Is opening private schools or opening schools that, or treat, I guess.
Yeah, it's already happening. I mean, we do still have a free market capitalist system, and that has been the response, both in the communications and online cyber realm, and in education. And I'll give you another example of a bunch of parents out in California who have set up, and I think this trend is expanding too. They've set up what they call pods. Pods are in-home education settings with a small number of children, maybe 5, 6, 7, no more. And the parents of those children chip in, and they hire a tutor, maybe one, maybe two. But the teacher to student ratio is really, a few students to each teacher. And they meet in a private home and give private education, private tutoring, but from a tutor who is actually an educator with credentials, not a parent who may not feel confident. I mean, I would not feel the slightest bit confident trying to teach mathematics. I'd be horrible. So they choose, tutors with credentials. But that's another example of what's going on in California. Pods, little home homeschool pods of small numbers of students with one or maybe two tutors.
That's insane, and that's awesome. It always starts small, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember, when Netflix was still a tiny thing that delivered physical DVDs, and Blockbuster offered to buy them for like $5 million. And they said, no, go pound sand. And now we see what Netflix is, and we see what Blockbuster was. Maybe this is the start of something like that, and it could have, and as the long march through the institutions, which you taught me about, has shown, you have to take Yuri Bezmenov, it takes 18 years for, destabilization, demoralization, because you have to teach, that's how long it takes to teach a generation, and then they grow up, and then another 10 years after that, they have started to fill the seats of power. What is happening now, we might not get to see the full crashing of the wave, the bearing of the fruit, the flowering of the results until 2039, 2040?
Well, I mean, I would say actually because of social media, because of the internet, because of modern technology and communication, things are moving much faster now than originally at the beginning of that long march through the institutions.
Okay, but that could go both ways though. Right.
Well, except that I think what we're talking about and what I'm seeing and writing about in my articles is that the groundswell of the pushback is really gaining momentum.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Is originally I was saying if they're starting pods and homeschooling, you would say that we're going on a long march through the institutions back towards a pro-America agenda. But what you're saying is also with the advent of social media, light speed technology, which is what, a cell phone is, the long march through the institutions back towards an America first mindset, it might be more of a sprint back through the institutions. It might have taken them 30 years to get here, but in that American fashion, we might use technology and get back in 18 months or 2 years.
Well, I don't mean to minimize the importance, the magnitude of the fight. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee that good guys are going to win. But what I am saying is that I see a groundswell that was not there even a year, 18 months ago.
Yeah. And, I always like to look back at, I like to, as you and Don the Pleb point out, my positivity and optimism is naive, and if we were in war, it would probably get us all killed.
I don't think I ever said that.
Don said that. You've never said that. I just lump you in with Don. And it's easier. See, there's a tactic. I just lump in everyone I don't like, and I put them together, and there you go, critical race theory, critical podcast theory. But I look back, and the one thing I do that does not fall in line with, I guess, my whole optimistic viewpoint is, well, kind of does, in a roundabout way. I look back at how horrible the situation has been before in the United States. The biggest of all, the actual inception of the United States, going against, we were the Taliban versus the United States. We were the colonists versus the Royal Empire.
Maybe not the Taliban, huh?
In terms of technological disparity, in terms of resources, I know Taliban. But the analogy stands.
We were colonists going up against the greatest empire on the face of the earth at that time.
That's what I mean. Now, granted, in the 2000s, the Taliban didn't win. They went against the greatest empire, the greatest military the world's ever seen. What I mean is,
they won all right. They definitely won, and they're going to win more, unfortunately. But that's another topic.
My point is, we have been in. Okay, well, let's look at an undisputed one. Let's look at World War II.
We won.
Exactly.
We Americans won.
Yes.
Our freedom.
Look.
Independence.
Imagine it's the evening of June 6, 1944, and the sands are pink with American blood, and you're sitting there going, "This is the beginning, and we're supposed to beat Germany and Japan." It didn't look too hot, but we got through it, and we conquered. You look at the depths of the Cold War, and you could argue we never got out of it. We did get out of it without thermonuclear annihilation. That's an objective fact. We will get through this. 9/11 sucked too. So did 2008. We will get through this, and I don't, like you said, I don't mean to minimize the threat we are under right now. I also think, all things considered, it's a blessing that this is the extent of our fight, is what I'm saying. Is shit has been so much worse before, and they've gotten through it. And people have stepped up to the plate. We have the greatest generation. We have the colonists. We have the revolutionaries. And we've gotten through all of those things. I think we're going to get through it again. And it's hard to see right now, just as I imagine on the evening of June 6th going, we're supposed to keep doing this, but we did, and we got through. And they're known as the greatest generation. I have no doubt that it's going to be an uphill battle. I also have no doubt that we're going to win. Because, as you said several episodes ago, tyranny cannot win because the human spirit, it can't fight for a system that's inherently evil. You might be able to establish a bulkhead, or a foot in the door. You might be able to set up a Nazi type thing, but ultimately, the average human being is always going to yearn towards freedom and opportunity and prosperity and love and safety. That is what's ingrained into us as humans, not even as Americans, as humans. And I just don't see that going down without a fight. And that is my official submission video for my presidential run. But I do. I think it's going to go well. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be a short fight. We might not even be at the worst part yet. I just refuse to believe that this is how we go down as a nation. A bunch of guys in skinny jeans with with black masks on, burning down Starbucks. We've been in worse spots. Yay, nay? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, realizing how bad the rot is, how far into our institutions the corruption has gone, including the entire United States government at every single level. We are in the thick of it. The battle is joined. The patriots are rising. But it's, Christmas Eve, December 1776. And no more than George Washington knew, neither do we know that we'll prevail. We're going to try. We're going to keep going. We're not giving up.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if we'll prevail or not.
Victory's never been guaranteed, though. I mean, what kind of, how real of a war is that really if you know you're going to win? That's not a war. You know you're going to win. A real war is you go in and you have no idea. It's called sink or swim because there's a 50% chance you might sink. That is the terror. Of course we can't know. I just don't see us losing. I just don't.
I would like that to be true.
So would I. I would like for a lot of things to be true, but I'm going to do my best to make it work. And ultimately, I think it's going to work. I think our best days are ahead of us. And yes, we're seeing the rot is deeper than anyone could have imagined. But what's the first step in a narcotics problem or a drinking problem? It's admitting you have a problem. It's the very first step. It's going to the doctor and getting the scan and going, okay, it's not just a bad back, there's a tumor. It's the very first step, and it's the shittiest step. But it's the very first step of acknowledging that something is horribly wrong. You got to diagnose it, and that's where we are right now. And we're at the shitty doctor appointment right now, where we're getting the scans back, and the doctor's using their best bedside manner to tell us inoperable. But that's the first step. And, I'd like to think that in 20 years or 30 years, someone will look back at this video and be like, yeah, they really had no idea how uphill it was. And then some other optimistic future Tommy will be like, but they did it. They did it. He was right. I just don't see us losing.
Let's hope so. Let's hope you're right.
Claire, I still got you 15 minutes if you got anything else that you would like to touch on. I know I've been ranting nonstop this episode.
No, covered a lot of important ground. The point of my article is more in line with your optimism maybe than my sober assessment. The article that we were talking about at Front Page Magazine was all about, at every level, citizen patriots, from the parents that I've been talking about, storming into the school board meetings, on up to state legislators, 21 plus states now have either introduced legislation or actually passed it and had the governor sign it to ban critical race theory teaching in the public schools of that state. And sometimes, they don't call it CRT, but I think wisely, more broadly define it as there will be no teaching that there is an oppressed group and an oppressor group. There will be no racial divisions made among the children in classes, etc. And then you go to a Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, who has just signed a bill which would demand the teaching about totalitarian systems, including communism and Marxism, in the Florida public schools. Not just you won't teach the bad stuff, you will teach not only good American civics, history, and foundational documents, founding fathers and all of that, but you will teach what is communism. You will teach what is totalitarian authoritarianism. That was just signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida. So that's the governor and government, state level kind of initiatives. And then there are other kind of groups, and I'm going to look at my article here to remember the names of these groups. There's a group called the Civics Alliance, which is formed to promote teaching of the U.S.'s founding principles and accurate history. There's a group called the American Cornerstone Institute, and that one was founded by Dr. Ben Carson, of course, brilliant neurosurgeon, and also former Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development in the Trump administration. And that one, the American Cornerstone Institute, focuses, as Ben Carson says, on promoting the first things principles that undergird our republic, and he names them as faith, liberty, community, and life. And then the final thing that I noted on the sort of organizational level, private but organizational, well, in a way private, but the President Trump's 1776 commission, right, formed, I think, a little belatedly, but last year, 2020, and they came out with their final report of the 1776 commission in August of last year, 2020. But that final report offers what I think is an excellent outline for teaching accurate, good American history, principles of the founding of the United States in 1776, and about striving to form a more perfect union, a phrase, of course, taken from the preamble to our Constitution, which recognizes that no, at the founding, we were not a perfect union, nor are we now, but that we continuously strive to be. And I've talked about this before, too, the aspirational, the idealistic nature of our foundational documents and our original 13 colonies. So yeah, those are the organizations I wanted to mention that have formed, and there are others. I apologize that I'm missing probably many more, and very excellent. But those are the ones that caught my attention when I was writing the article.
I didn't know that. I knew that DeSantis was getting rid of critical race theory. I didn't know he was making it obligatory or mandatory to learn about totalitarian systems and how they come
Brand
to
new.
power.
I mean, literally signed into law yesterday or the day before.
That's amazing. That is.
He's amazing.
That is. Well, I mean, he is, but I mean, it's again what Tim Kennedy did on his Instagram a couple months ago, and it was him sitting there with a bunch of like assault rifles and his little kid, and he was like, he just listed political, or I guess governmental acts over the last 120 years about in different nations in different decades about how it always one leads to the other, and so is the seizing of weapons, the disarming of the populace, and it's followed by political persecution and then state-sponsored and constructed and I guess premeditated genocide. And his thing got flagged by the Instagram fact checkers, right? Goebbels would be proud, saying that there is no evidence of seizing weapons, and which is patently bullshit. But
we would call that patently false.
Yes, patently false. It's what that is, though, is you can see the importance of it because no one's going to teach. You can't expect the people who are responsible for these systems to teach you about what leads to these systems. If I work for Big Tobacco, I'm not going to teach you about the problems of smoking cigarettes. I think that's awesome. I had no idea DeSantis did that.
Brand new, like I said, within the last couple of days, signed into law. Yeah.
I think that's.
I mean, a terrific initiative. Other states are following, not quite yet at that level, that point. But like I said, at least 21 at the count that I looked at, maybe more now. Legislation either in process right now or already signed into law to ban critical race theory or similar indoctrination of our children in the schools.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pushback is happening. It's coming, and it's coming from the grassroots. Mm-hmm. This is not coming off of Capitol Hill.
No.
Now, yes, it is coming out of some state capitals, but that's local as well, in a way. So it's not going to come from Capitol Hill. It's going to come from the grassroots. And you know, I repeat this all the time, that it is up to citizen patriots to take back this republic. And it's beginning to gather momentum. It's beginning to happen. We'll
wrap it up on this note, and I've talked about this before. the smartest person I've ever met in my life. It's a guy I went to high school with and I knew in college. He's a physician, just unbelievably intelligent, and he's a diehard patriot as well. But I always remember how I would study around the clock for the pre-med courses we had to take. And I did well in them. I was a straight A student. He always scored higher than me. But he wouldn't, there were always days where he wouldn't study that I would be studying. And you would think, like, well, I should be pulling ahead. And he would go out on a Friday night and party it up like you'd think he's a frat boy. And, go crazy, hungover the next day, laying around, eating fast food, playing video games. And I'd always ask him, I'd be like, why, you score so high? You could score even higher if you didn't do that. If you were a crazy person like me and locked yourself in your room and studied. And he was like, that is not at all true. And he was like, because when you wake up Sunday morning and you're kind of rolling into that 2-day hangover and you realize you have a test in 24 hours, nothing will sharpen your mind like that fear, knowing that I have one chance to get into medical school and this is a weed out class. Nothing will make you'll put your phone down, your thoughts won't be wandering, you won't be thinking about girls, you won't be going, I should go get some food. Nothing is going to make you look at those chemical reactions and understand those valence electrons and what you need to turn hydrogen gas and palladium into this ketone and SN. Nothing will sharpen your mind like fear. And I've used his advice 10 years later, and that's why I don't get out of bed until about 2 hours before I have a podcast. Today was different, but because I wake up and I look at my clock, and as soon as it hits 2 hours before, I'm terrified that I'm not going to get to the gym, do a mile of cardio, lift weights, come home, take a cold shower, change, eat breakfast, meditate, set up all the cameras, and get ready to go. But I do every morning because that terror that I'm going to put out a bad product drives me to do it. Now, if I wake up 3 hours or 4 hours before I've done it, I barely am ready on time. It's the fear that drives me to. So the point of me saying all of this is maybe this is our collective waking up on Sunday morning and realizing we got a test tomorrow. It's better late than never.
Well, I actually thought you were going to say something different there. And
really?
I would throw this into the mix.
Okay.
I think that every now and then, I'm talking about us on a kind of a personal level,
sure,
we need a break. You cannot go pedal to the metal 24/7, 365 days a year and continue to be sharp every single moment. Mm-hmm. You've got to take time out for yourself, for your family, to take some downtime, mm-hmm. to refresh your batteries, as it were. Yeah. And if that's just a single day, maybe it's only a couple of hours in a day, but you got to do it on a regular basis if you're going to remain sharp.
I actually have in the last month or so, and my mom said something similar to me, and I do. I take Saturdays off now, and I feel and I hate it because I'm like, I could be working. I feel so much better, but on a bigger scale, I do see it as this pushback, the pods, the homeschooling, the DeSantis legislation. I do see.
Excuse me.
You're good. I do see that as sort of we're waking up scared shitless. A republic if you can keep it, and we're all waking up going, oh man, we have not been keeping this thing, and now we're all working towards that. That's what I believe, at least.
Well, on we go.
Miss Clare Lopez, and I am taking your advice. I take Saturdays off, don't you worry. But I will put your Twitter in the description. I'll put your article in the description as well as your website. And thank you.
Nope, don't have a website yet.
I thought Clare
Still working on that.
Okay, well, then what have I been linking?
I don't know.
Probably just your Twitter then. Maybe I'm just...
maybe Twitter, Facebook, at Clare M. Lopez. Maybe other sites where I post things like my writing and my videos. Front Page Magazine, of course, being one of them. Project of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. At American Truth Project. Certainly at the United West. Where else?
I think United West is what I've been linking.
Excellent. There. That'll get picked up and replayed other places too. Might be forgetting a few. I am supposed to be writing a blog at the newsmax.com website. Got to get back to that. Those are the ones, yeah, the main ones that I would say where you can find right now, the things that I'm writing and broadcasting and interviews and things like that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Ms. Lopez. As always, it's a pleasure. And thank you. Don't give up hope, everyone. It's a good fight. It's the only good fight. But more importantly, it's going to be a fight. It's not going to be easy. So
Yeah.
God bless. God bless you, Ms. Lopez. God bless America.
Thank you.
God bless all you guys. Stay safe. And until next time.
See you then.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.